All right, everybody. Today we're doing a very quick review on the Industrial Revolution, going through the revolutionary period. We often forget about the Industrial Revolution, which is going to begin in England. It starts there for several reasons. Number one, the British Isles, disconnected from the continent, are not involved in a lot of the many wars and antagonisms that the continent will suffer. Also, it is blessed with plentiful raw materials, things necessary for industry like iron ore and coal used in the making of steel and iron. And because of, Parliament and some of the ideas that have come through, society is freer than those on the continent. There are no tolls and tariffs to cross bridges and use waterways. The infrastructure is sound, and it is cheaper to conduct business inside of England. And industrialization starts out in the countryside. Previous to this, rural workers would work on their farm through the spring, summer, and fall. And then in the winter, when they couldn't go outside when it was dark and cold, they would spin wool into cloth. It's the term cottage industries. Then in the spring, textile factories or mills would come by and take that wool and they would buy it and they would turn it into clothes. But this makes it very difficult as the supply of wool is spread out all over the countryside. It takes a lot of time to collect it all. And there's going to be a few inventions like Richard Arkwright's water frame and the spinning jenny, which is kind of like an old foot pumper spinning wheel that your grandma used, or think of like a motorized Sleeping Beauty to, wind that wool. Or the water frame, which is a spinning wheel powered by water, but you got to be next to a stream or a river or a creek to make it happen. And then James Watt comes up with the steam engine. It is the number one industrial invention of the Industrial Revolution. And the steam engine changes things. Because for the first time ever, people have a portable, steady, reliable source of power. It can work in the rain, it can work in the sun, it can work in the day, it can work at night. It doesn't get tired, you don't have to feed it, and most importantly, you can pick it up and move it. You don't have to be by a creek or a stream or a river. And the main ingredient for the Industrial Revolution is iron. And the steam engine, when it's applied to the blast furnace, can smelt iron ore as in like rock, and you have to superheat it and melt the iron out of the rock in order to get it molten so you can shape it. Think of the orcs in Lord of the Rings hammering all their iron down there. Well, the steam engine can pump not only iron ore on a feeder into the blast furnace, but it can also push the heat in the flame. It can superheat the vacuum, causing you to be able to smelt a lot more iron ore. So, working with Michael Bolton and a couple other inventors, some toy makers and cannon makers, when the steam engine is applied to transportation, making steam engines for automobiles, for trains and steamships, material can be transported in greater numbers than ever before. You can move equipment. You don't have to worry about the wind and the sails in your ships. You now have a machine that can take you into the wind, against the current. It doesn't matter. A steady, reliable source of power to transport goods. Loading it on the old steamship, you can now take more stuff than ever before. And as a result of the steam engine, it's going to cause cities to grow. There's a big change. In the Middle Ages, cities were built on old trading paths. Think of Nottingham, where, Robin Hood is running around. Well, those were inland. Those were all on old medieval trading paths. But now new cities are going to grow up along the coasts, where shipping is important, or factories are going to be built where there's plentiful, cheap land and labor. So we're going to cause a population switch as old medieval towns are abandoned and new cities are going to be created, a rural to urban movement. In 1500, whoa, that's not quite, there were only 154 cities with a population of over 10,000. Only 4 cities had a population of over 100,000. Biggest city in Europe at this time was Florence, 100,000 people. Now we know the Roman Empire had a population of over 1 million. And Florence right now is a nice sized town, but it's not a city. There was very, very, very few large cities in Europe, and 3 of the 4 were around the old Roman Empire. Well, by 1800, by the time the Industrial Revolution is underway, there are 363 large cities with a population of over 10,000, and 17 have a population of over 100. It is a massive population boom and switch. And the earlier stages of the Industrial Revolution will grow in the country. Again, where it's cheaper to build a factory out in the farmland, where land and the labor to do it is much cheaper. BMW builds a factory in South Carolina not long ago. They didn't build it in Michigan when they would have to pay a UAW, United Auto worker, $25, $28 an hour. They build it in South Carolina, where there's plentiful land, and the people in South Carolina would do the same job for like 11 to 14 bucks an hour instead of 25 to 28. It's a right to work state. So let's move our factory down there. When you build a factory out in the countryside, people move in. You need houses for the people to live in. You need schools for the children to work in. And entire towns grow up. You need restaurants and movie theaters and hardware stores and grocery stores. They build up around the factory. So industrialization creates new towns and creates a rural to urban movement. And as a result, new methods of government are created. Throughout this whole time, the most dynamic class is the middle class, which has the ability to pull the lower up and the upper down. The middle class are people who want to work hard. They want to get their children an education or a better place in life than they have. So they're going to bust their butt. Well, that's the middle class. Some of these people, their children will turn into the bourgeoisie. Now these are successful people, maybe artisans, merchants, but they're not overwhelmingly rich. And they, along with the middle class, have badly wanted access to the political process. But they've always been suppressed by the aristocracy, who is afraid of losing their power. And under the new industrialization process, it's artisans who are going to suffer the most. Many of them are needed to build the factory: the carpenter, the stonemason, the bricklayer. But once the factories are built, their skills are no longer needed. And in their old guild system, they controlled the quality and the price of an item. They dictated how good the item was going to be and how much was going to be charged. Now, when the factories are built, you can make things much quicker and faster and cheaper, like Henry Ford's Model T that everyone could invent, and people lose control of the factors of production. They no longer have control over the price and quality of an item. And this is known as proletarianization, when the worker loses control of those things. And factories are set up not with the human quotient, what the human needs in mind, but it's made to maximize the efficiency of the machine. And I will use the Johnny Depp Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie, where Charlie Bucket's dad was a toothpaste tube cap screwer honor. It was a low-skill job. Well, when they got a robot to do it, Charlie Bucket's dad was fired. It was industrialized. It was done by a machine. So people no longer matter. It is machines that do, keeping them running 24 hours a day. So the human schedule doesn't matter. You no longer have control of the quality or the price of an item. So artisans begin a practice called a confection. It's one size fits all. It may be too big, it may be too small, but we no longer have the ability to tailor make your suit for you. Now we're going to make a small, a medium, and a large. You better fit into one, because we can no longer take the time. It costs us too much money, because you could go buy one cheaper at a Walmart. Right? People no longer, skill is not a priority. And masters, business owners, will increase production, all right, to lower the cost. Or if their workers start complaining about working conditions or low pay, they will be fired, and we'll bring in new workers from a different county or a different town who are all too glad to have your job. They'll work at a lower price in worse conditions because they want the job that you have. And we see that now in Europe with Eastern Europeans and the ongoing debate about, illegal aliens, migrant workers. I don't know what the politically correct term is in America, but if someone is willing to do a job, well, they are going to get the job. All right, so masters increase this cost. You're going to stand on your feet. You're going to do the same repetitive task over and over and over. And this is going to cause a change in the family structure, where dads are separated from the workplace for 12 to 14 hours, 6, maybe 7 days a week. Where before this, mom and dad taught the kids the skills they need at home. Well, this no longer happens because dad isn't there. Maybe mom is going to work too, so the discipline and the teaching of the kid turns over to the school system. And there's in the 1830s, unmarried women were excited because they finally had a choice. They could leave their small farm town and they could go work in a factory, and they would stay in a dormitory and they could save their own money. And this gave them a choice of who they could marry, hopefully, have a husband and raise a family, and they can quit their job rather than have to marry the farmer's son next door. But women, all right, can be exploited, because if you're a young lady, you may have to work longer hours in worse conditions for lower pay because you have nowhere else to go. Also dealing with like harassment issues. Young children, to help some poor families get by, are forced to work as well. We'll get the young boy, the young girl, their light, their lift. Oh, stick your hand up in that machine. If you get your arm ripped off, well, that's too bad for you. All right, there is no health insurance. There is no hospital. I'll get another new kid to work there tomorrow. And so all this changes in 1835 with the English Factory Act, where students have to be given 2 hours of schooling every day paid for by the factory. They work an 8-hour shift, then they get 2 hours of schooling. You guys complain about being in here all day. Well, how would you rather work a factory job and come in here for 2 hours, or have the educational system that we do now? All of a sudden, what you have to go through a day doesn't look so bad. There are some positives to this. Middle-class families have enough money from several different sources that maybe the children don't have to work. Maybe mom doesn't have to work, and the family can get ahead. They can have surplus income. They are not living hand to mouth. But later on, middle class and upper women would stay home. The husband and the kids may go off to work or school, and mom stayed at home. And this increases gender roles, like stereotypical gender roles where mom is the homemaker. But it gave some women a sense of empowerment. They were in charge of the household. They took care of the bills and the upkeep and the maintenance at home while the husband worked. And mom was in charge of the home environment. In the old days, kids would get off the school bus and mom would have chocolate chip cookies and Kool-Aid. But now in the new modern world, everyone's afraid of Kool-Aid and chocolate chips like you're eating carcinogen wafers. So now everyone gets glaciatic melted water from Switzerland and lightly salted kale chips or some stupid thing like that. Those are your snacks when you get home to the welcoming mom, as she is there to make things happy and sunshine. When husband gets home, you know, dinner is on the table and stuff like that. Things from like the 1950s. So anyway, that's where we're going to stop with the Industrial Revolution in Europe. We'll go to the Meiji Restoration in Japan. But the big thing is the Industrial Revolution changes the world quicker and faster than any other time besides maybe the Neolithic Revolution. More goods and services are made. They're made quicker, faster, and cheaper. Some people no longer requires the entire family to work, and there are new methods of migration, a rural to urban migration where old cities die off and new cities are created. I'll use an example. It's like Cleveland and Detroit. A lot of the people from the old manufacturing Midwest are moving to places like North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, not only for the nicer weather, because there are jobs. The steel making, the auto making, those jobs are gone, and people are leaving the once very densely populated Midwest down to the South, changing the power structure of the United States. Same thing happened like this way back in the Industrial Revolution. It starts in England. Eventually, Germany captures on, and the United States does as well. The United States is, becomes a major industrial power, much like Great Britain, because of our natural resources and the massive labor pool that we employ. All right, guys. Good luck on your test Thursday. I'll see you tomorrow.